country will unite behind him now, but this is bound to bring his position into question. It's a huge failure of security, and he has billed himself as Mr. Security.
Rishi Sunak has just said that anyone in the UK found to be supporting Hamas in the wake of the attack on Israel would be held to account. He's been on a visit in East Staffordshire. He said he stands in solidarity with Israel and the people of Israel in the face of these barbaric acts of terrorism. He visited a synagogue in London last night to show his support for the Jewish community. He says, I was unequivocal with them that we'll make sure that they feel safe at this time, and the police have been given very clear guidance and advice from the government to do everything that we can to keep the community safe. They will clamp down on any behaviour that falls foul of the law. I'd just remind everyone that Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organisation. People should not be supporting Hamas, and we'll make sure that we hold people to account if they are. Those words just in from the Prime Minister. But it comes after Israel said this morning that it finally secured its border with Gaza 3 days after Hamas launched that terror attack, which killed more than 900 people. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have continued, with more than 700 people there killed, according to Palestinian authorities. Hamas has threatened to murder one hostage for every unannounced Israeli strike on Gaza. Well, Bronwen Maddox is the chief executive of the Chatham House think tank and joins me now here in Liverpool. Bronwen, what are we to make now, 48 hours after all this happened? What's been your assessment of what's happened so far, and then what do you expect to see in the next few days?
Both huge questions. I mean, I think it's impossible to overstate the shock to Israel of this, and every report from Israel, just the sense of a country that's so much identified itself with its own defence, its security, and in a tough neighbourhood, in that famous phrase. The security establishment having let down the country in this way, and then just the shock of not being able to be safe in their homes, which is the very intention of Hamas in doing this.
Are we getting any sense of how this intelligence and security failure happened? Like you said, a country which prides itself on its enormous military might, intelligence services, security services.
We're getting some sense, because a lot of the intelligence community in Israel, or former intelligence chiefs, have been commenting on this and saying they saw signs but interpreted them wrongly. And because of the overall narrative, if you like, that their judgment, put it more strongly, that Hamas did not want a fight at this point. It wanted more access for people in Gaza to the Israeli economy, more permits to go out, and they were really focusing on the West Bank, where there's been a lot of trouble this year. They just didn't expect it, and so when they saw Hamas training and preparing and all kinds of things, they assumed it was just the eternal training that Hamas does.
And what about the international community's response? Because at the moment, and certainly speaking to lots of senior Labour figures here, they condemn Hamas for carrying out what they say is a terror attack. They say that Israel has the right to respond to try to catch the perpetrators. But there's a difference between that and a blanket check to Israel to do whatever they want, to mount what then becomes a full-blown conflict. Is there anything that the international community can do to prevent that happening?
Yes, they can talk to Israel. I mean, I think, as you said, there has been a wall of condemnation of Hamas over this, and huge support for Israel. And there isn't an awful lot between the UK government position and between Labour. Labour's David Lammy, Shadow Foreign Secretary, who I'm talking to later today, he inserted the word proportionately, and so Israel, is justified in proportionate response. But there isn't really very much. Countries are absolutely outraged and horrified at this. They can talk to Israel and say, look, it's not going to help you if many civilians in Gaza are killed. They can talk to Israel about the tactics of trying to kill the leadership of Hamas, which is what Israel is trying to do at this point. But it is an incredibly difficult series of decisions for Israel, partly because of the hostages.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the thing, is that given the horrifying pictures we've seen over the weekend of the attack in Israel, which were clearly against innocent people, Israelis going about their lives. It wasn't about military structures or even senior Israeli figures. It was about just ordinary people going about their lives. But Israel, for a window, has the moral high ground, having been the victims of that attack. But if it overreaches in its response in Gaza, then that causes problems for everyone as well.
I guess so, but it's hard to say what enormous overreaching would be at this point. Israel
Well, I
is
suppose
absolutely
targeting-
justified in defending itself and retaliating
I suppose a
against this.
sustained conflict which targeted innocent Palestinians. Some people would say that would be an extreme response.
If it targeted innocent Palestinians, yes, and you're absolutely right in the way you described the Hamas attack, which was terror. It was going out to kill and capture civilians and disrupt and shatter ordinary life. But I think Israel's problem is that Gaza is so densely built that any attack or any pursuit of the Hamas leaders carries a very high risk of killing an awful lot of Palestinians. And for Israel to say Palestinians should leave, it's a bit hard to know how they're going to do that. Gaza is so dense and there's nowhere for them to go.
And just finally, Benjamin Netanyahu's position. I mean, he's been in the news constantly for the last couple of years for what he wants to do to the Constitution and the protests around that. Does his position become stronger because the country unites behind him in the face of this attack? Or, given the security failings and the intelligence failings, does this threaten his position, given that he's dominated politics for so long in Israel?
The country will unite behind him now, but this is bound to bring his position into question. It's a huge failure of security, and he has billed himself as Mr. Security. He's said that for years and years and years. And the internal furious rows about Israeli democracy, about his reforms of the Supreme Court powers and so on, those arguably weakened the Israeli establishment so that it wasn't looking. I think in the longer term, all of this really weakens Benjamin Netanyahu.
Bronwen, really good to see you. Thanks so much for joining.